Polos buys the first piece of the Gamma Quadrant for 36 bars of gold pressed latinum. Q is called the god of lies on Brax, but they mean it affectionately. And Quarks makes a delicious couscous. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we're doing a review of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Episode 6Q Less. Story by Hannah Louise Shearer. Teleplay by Robert Hewitt Wolfe. Directed by Paul Lynch. This was February 7th, 1993. Where were you? And we have a very, very special guest today. What a coincidence. Writer-producer, the legend. He's finally back. We coerced him. It's Robert Hewitt Wolfe.
Hey, guys. Happy to be here.
So good to have you back again. We loved having you. You've been on our show so many times. You're so fun. You're so interesting. You give us so much backstory and insights. No pressure, but we're really excited to have you back, though, honestly. Thank you.
It's fun talking with you guys.
This is a great episode, too.
Yeah.
Where to start with this one? This is a callback, right?
Where do we go?
This is Q's debut on Deep Space Nine.
Is one and only.
That's where I wanted to start.
And his finale.
Actually, yeah. The first thought was, Robert, were you planning on having Q in multiple episodes? Was that a discussion? Was this a one-off, or was it more of like a Majel Roddenberry thing where you expected him to be more of a recurring character like she was expected to be? Do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, just some background is that I wrote this episode as a freelancer. I was not yet on staff. Wow. So and the episode story was by Hannah Louise Shearer. So like I was handed the story essentially. And so I wasn't really part of those discussions, but I was certainly there when we broke the story and, during the writing and rewriting process, working with the staff. And I would say, I think we thought we'd have Q again. I think we thought we would get more of Q and that this was just like a first taste and that he would have a relationship with Sisko that was different than his relationship, sort of obviously more combative and a little tenser than his relationship with Card, although they have a lot of tension in their relationship too, but just that Sisko's a different dude, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, I don't know whether you guys might not know this or not, but basically they decided not too long after this, as they were starting to ramp up Voyager, like a year later, they decided that Q would be a big part of Voyager, Q and the Borg. And so we were basically told we couldn't use Q and we couldn't use the Borg. Which, I mean, honestly, the Borg hurt more than Q because, Sisko's backstory was so about the Borg.
Right.
But that was it. So that was the declaration, and so we were told we couldn't use them anymore. I mean, in exchange for that, we got the entire Alpha and Beta Quadrant. So we got Klingons and Vulcans and Romulans and
the Gamma Quadrant.
And the Gamma Quadrant. So we got 3/4 of the galaxy in exchange for Q and the Borg. And so that was fine. I enjoyed. I like John Delancey. I mean, obviously, Q is a great character. John Delancey is a delight to work with. I used him later on in Andromeda when I had my own show. And yeah, it was fun to write for him. But yeah, it was kind of, it ended up being a one-off. So it goes.
Question, Robert. I have long since had this question in my mind about what is the dividing line between teleplay by and story by.
Sure.
What is that like? What do you get handed in order to write the teleplay?
On Star Trek, it depends on the show, but on Star Trek, the story documents were like 5 to 7 page, double spaced documents, Word, And so that's a certain amount of information, but it is just like the big beats of the story. And then whoever writes the teleplay breaks the story with the staff and creates the outline and then the script. So some shows the outline is the story. Some shows it's the story document itself. And so what I got handed was
those are usually 5 to 7 pages. Like a 5 to 7
I got
page
a 5 to 7 page document. I'm not sure why Hannah didn't end up writing the script, because obviously I wasn't part of that decision process, or what, I don't know what was going on with her. But I got handed her story document, and then they asked me what I would do with it, and I sort of pitched out some things. The biggest thing that I sort of talked about was that there was an entire 5th act where they went back to the Gamma Quadrant with that egg, you know?
Oh.
And it kind of felt like once you knew what was going on, the story was kind of over, and it was time to end it. And so that was my big thing, was like, I don't think we need this 5th act at all, guys. Like, let the thing hatch. It can go back through the wormhole by itself. And then they the staff agreed. So that was probably the biggest single change.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense, right? At that point, that's the end of the episode. The rest is just, extra or fun or interesting or leading into something further maybe, but it has nothing to do really with the story.
Yeah. And once they were back in the Gamma Quadrant, Q and Vash weren't part of the story anymore. And whether, like, rightly or wrongly, they're sort of the heart of the episode. So, and that once that story is done and you've identified the menace and you've gotten rid of it, the fun of the episode is basically done too. So that was my 2 cents on it. But yeah, that's the difference. And then just in terms of, this is really deep in the weeds, but the Writers Guild considers the story a third of the work and the teleplay 2/3 of the work. So if you see written by, that means the same person did the teleplay and the story, and they basically did the whole episode. If you see story by, that's saying that this person originated the idea, they did the initial story work, and then teleplay is the person who actually wrote the episode, the script.
So you gave us another nugget in there, Robert, which was you were hired on as a freelance writer. So this was kind of the episode that got your foot in the door, or were you a freelance writer for a while after that, or did they kind of say, I like the cut of your jib, kid, can you join us?
This was the second stage in my audition process, basically. The first stage was that I sold A Fistful of Datas to Next Generation. Got to write the teleplay for that. Well, the first stage is I actually sold the story. The second stage is that they actually liked my work enough that they invited me in to be the writer on the story. So I wrote the first draft of that script, then Brandon rewrote it. Awesome. And so on that one, it's story by me, teleplay by me and Brandon, right? And then based on the strength of that work, they asked me to do this freelance for Deep Space Nine. Based on my work on the freelance of Deep Space Nine, they hired me on the staff as a staff writer. So that's how I basically got onto the franchise as a full-time writer.
Wow.
That's an amazing journey. What a journey.
It was fun, and like I did all this. I can't remember the exact timeline, but I do know the day they told me I was being hired on staff was my birthday. So it was like October. You guys we hadn't premiered yet, right? It was late October. Yeah. And so they were just starting to shoot like the second episode by the time when I was in there writing cue lists and breaking it with them, they were just starting to shoot the pilot, Emissary. And by the time I was hired on the staff, I think they just finished shooting the third episode, and cue list is the 6th episode. So I wasn't there from the very beginning, but I was there sort of early days.
Practically.
Yeah. Right from the beginning, but episode 6 and on.
Happy birthday.
I think I started officially. Yeah. I think I officially started as a staff writer maybe episode 8. I don't know, because they didn't credit me on screen, so I have no idea what.
What's your birthday?
October 28th.
Got it. So we know forever that was the day that you were told that you will be joining on. Wow, that's awesome.
Birthday present ever.
Yeah.
You know what? I got my job on DS9 on my birthday. Rick called me up on my birthday, August 7th.
Wow.
I'll never forget that too. Yeah, so it was my birthday gift. I don't know if that's a thing that they do in Star Trek.
I don't think they do it on purpose, but I don't know, maybe they do. But see, that's telling. So Cirroc was hired August 7th, right? So that means they were just getting ready to shoot Emissary. And you were probably on set like a week or two after that? Remember?
Probably, yeah, probably about 2 weeks. I would say fitting
So
after a
2 weeks,
fitting.
say like end of August, he was in there, and that's about when they hired me to work on QLess. So it was all like super early days. I don't even think I think they cast Terry was the last person cast from what I remember, and she was cast while we were breaking that story. I think, if I remember correctly.
Wow,
Anyway.
that late along. Well, one more birthday connection is that Deep Space Nine premiered on January 3rd, 1993. January 3rd is Malissa Longo's birthday. So that was her birthday present, was this amazing show. I don't have anything, but I know that one.
Robert, so you're doing this episode. How much of rewatching the original Next Generation episode with Q and Bosch did you do prior, research wise for this?
I had been watching reruns every night of Next Generation. They were on at midnight in Los Angeles at the time, I think, or 11 o'clock at night on like channel 13 or something. So I was watching them every day to get up to speed to write Fistful of Data. So I think I did see Cupid, I think it was, in the course of that. And then what they did was because it was back in the day, there weren't like videotapes even of these things lying around that they could give people,
Right.
So I think they gave me the scripts for the Q episodes to reread. And that was all I really had were those scripts, if I remember correctly. And this is 30 years ago, guys. So I'm doing my best.
I can't believe you got hired on as a 7-year-old too. That must have been really.
Yeah, I know. I had to go to kindergarten. I just gotten out of kindergarten, and thank you.
You wrote.
I wish I were 38 years old.
No, there were lines in this episode that I had to write down that I just thought were amazing, and hat tip to you because you just knocked it out of the park. I love when Q describes Picard as that self-righteous do-gooder. And
you would like that, Cirroc.
I did like that a little bit. He took a shot.
Yeah.
It was a tasteful shot.
It was tasteful. Rewatching it, I feel like, and this is like only episode 6, and I totally get why. And I didn't come up with this story, but it really is an episode about Q. You know what I mean? It's really not about any of our cast. And watching it now, I kind of feel like that maybe was a mistake in a weird way, because like Q is taking shots at everybody, but he's taking shots at the Deep Space Nine crew and saying they're basically not as good as the Next Generation crew. And he's supposed to be an a-hole, so whatever he says is supposed to be wrong, but the audience knew Q better than they knew our characters,
Right.
And so for him to say that, and the whole dynamic essentially being like, let's see how Q plays with our people, I don't know. I'm not sure it was the right thing to do in retrospect.
That's a really good point.
The greater health of the show.
Yeah.
It was the job they gave me, and I did try to have a lot of fun with like, oh, you were one of the little people with O'Brien, and stuff like that, to take the shots there too. And Picard never hit me, and I'm not Picard, which is probably my favorite moment in the episode.
Yeah,
it's a big one among fandom. It's one of the biggest.
That meme is great,
Yes.
And then I love the meme like Q shows up on Deep Space Nine, Sisko punches him in the face, and he never comes back. Which
right,
is fun, but the end of that scene is you're not Picard. You're much easier to provoke. And I don't know.
I thought that was kind of there were some digs that he took that I was gonna highlight, and you're highlighting them. One was when, like, the first thing Q says when he sees Sisko is Starfleet penalizing you, or did you ask for such a dismal command? That was his first words, and it kind of stung because it was a little bit true, right? It was Sisko didn't like that.
But also, like, again, in retrospect, like, is that the best thing to say to the audience in episode 6? That this place is dismal,
right?
That the next generation crew would have solved all this technobabble hours ago.
Right.
I don't know. And again, like, I was handed the story, and the whole idea was to have Q, because that's what Q does to everybody, right? Q does that to everybody. That's the character. He's always saying insulting stuff to people's faces. And he's always dismissive and always condescending. And so this was his way of being condescending to our people. But I don't know. Was it the right way to go? I don't know. I kind of felt like watching it now, and I hadn't watched it in years. I was like, oh, I don't know, man. I didn't like the shots I was writing.
Well, it's a good point, because as a viewer, you're right. We're watching this. We haven't had enough episodes to sink our teeth into these characters to when Q insults them, we can say, no, they aren't. No, they aren't dumb. Right. No, they aren't this. I've seen them for 40 episodes. I know that he's full of shit. Right now on episode 6, he says that, and we might just say, oh, I don't know. I guess they are incompetent. We don't know yet. It's an interesting point. Yeah. Here's the meme you were talking about, Robert. It's got a picture of Picard. It says, quoted Shakespeare at Q, lectured Q, berated Q, was annoyed by Q for 7 years, had his girlfriend stolen by Q, and then Janeway yelled at Q, insulted Q, lectured Q, was annoyed by Q for 6 years, had to mediate a civil war, had to watch Q's kid, and then Sisko punched Q in the face, never saw him again.
Yeah,
and that's sure, But the other thing people don't talk about is, like, Q punched him like 3 times before that,
really baby, like comical punches,
little jabs and whatever.
Yeah.
And Sisko really, act like he's particularly hurt by it. He's more annoyed by it, but like, But yeah, that bit I like. The fact that that's sort of what the memory that's in fans' minds of the episode, I do enjoy, But look, I mean, Sisko is a man of action. In retrospect, is the fact that he dealt with Q sort of violently at a moment, right? I mean, the real thing he does is he kind of like convinces Vash to go to the Daystrom Institute and like re-embrace her Federationness, That's really the win at the end, Punching Q in the face was just like being annoyed to the point of like finally punching him in the face.
Well, Robert, you said that you don't like the way you maybe in hindsight could have done some different things. Would you have had Q put them in a situation similar to what he does in Next Generation and have Sisko argue his way out of it the way that Picard does?
Look, if they had not handed me a story about Q, and also, look, I was a young writer and like, I didn't know what I was doing. But if I had to do it over again, and look, I think people remember this episode fondly. It's a fun episode of television. It's fun.
Yeah.
But like in retrospect, if I had it to do over again, I probably would have done something more like that. I probably wouldn't have had Vash there at all. Like, she's lovely, and Jennifer Etheridge is terrific and funny and, a great presence. But it becomes her episode. It's really her episode. A character we're never going to see again. So I would have tried to figure out a way to make it more like, a Sisko episode where he was the one with the main relationship with Q, where Q was trying to recreate this relationship with Picard, and it was going off in different directions than Q expected, and where Q is then becoming more maybe malevolent and escalating in ways that he wouldn't do with Picard because of his, narcissism.
That would be a great way to introduce these characters that are new to us. Is we've seen how Picard's crew deals with Q. Now Q tries to toy with his favorite humans, species or whatever with these guys. And Sisko and his crew deal with him in a completely different manner, more of an extension of the punch in the face, kind of just reacting differently. Yeah. And then we learn more about their crew and how they're different from the Enterprise crew.
Yeah. I mean, like, I just feel like, look, again, like, this is 30-year hindsight, and this is also, this is the episode that launched my career in a lot of ways. And again, it's fondly remembered, but it's just like, it was just struck by that this time watching it. Who I was today sitting there watching it was like, did this sort of feed into the early fan sentiment, some of the early negative fan sentiment? I'm like, there's lots of people who love the show right from the start, but there was also we got a fair amount of like fan discontent at the beginning too. It's not a starship. They're not going anywhere. It is dismal. You know what I mean? And then my other thing is like, there was way too much technobabble. I mean, I even called out the word technobabble. I might be the first person who said it on screen.
I was going to say that you have to be the first.
Yeah.
It's the first appearance of the word technobabble. I don't think it's ever been used prior to this. And I think you should get super credit for that. Where's the technobabble? Who else wrote that word? I don't remember that being a word before that.
I don't think it. I think it was something that was discussed internally. It was a word that was talked about in the writer's room on Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and I'd been in those two rooms. But it just struck me as such a great word and something that Q would certainly talk about. But like, part of the issue with that script was also that, like, Rick specifically coming from Next Generation, where like the science was a big deal in a weird way. Like the science was a character, and so he was pushing for more and more and more of that, the graviton particles, the cuts away to the bridge, and all that stuff. And it was just like, there's no character there. That's the problem with technobabble. Like when O'Brien is fixing the shuttle bay doors and like, or the runabout doors, and when Dax and him and Kira are talking about what's going on the station, like none of that is like human. It's all kind of like abstract. I wish we'd been able to say we could do with a lot less of this,
Mm-hmm.
But I'd rather have a scene with Cirroc and Avery than a scene of Dax talking about graviton particles. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah. But the word technobabble definitely has to be the first appearance of the word.
Mm-hmm. I Googled it, and you are not credited as the first writer to put it on screen. So somebody that works for Memory Alpha or Wiki, call the president if you have to, but this needs to be established.
And actually, in honor of that, Robert, I think Ryan and I should add a segment to this, the technobabble of the episode segment for each one of these episodes. We're going to have a line of technobabble that we're going to highlight.
For me, is that
incomprehensible line of like,
pre-ganglionic and post-ganglionic nerve ending.
Oh, that was, I will say I enjoyed that scene a lot. I think Michael wrote most of that. Like that was mostly Michael. One of the things that's always kind of like that like slightly annoyed me then, and like I eventually corrected, was like the mistake that he makes, the pre-ganglionic fiber and the post-ganglionic nerve or whatever it is. Not a real mistake that you would make. I mean, it's just like real doctors, those are very different things, as my wife, who has a better grounding and all that stuff, pointed out to me. So later on, I said he did it on purpose. Like he actually,
remember that. We've had other doctors point that out too, where they're like, that's not a.
He's too smart for that.
Yeah.
I thought also, you made Q a little bit vicious in this one. Like he was cool to Vash's character when he aged her and kind of put the warts all over her and made, I was like, whoa, I don't remember Q being that brutal to somebody with his power. Usually it's a situational thing, not a direct torture type thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he basically tortured her. I mean, the subtext of what's going on between the two of them is it was kind of an abusive relationship she was trying to get out of. Right? Yeah. I mean, this is really an episode about a woman trying to leave her predatory, awful, abusive, narcissistic boyfriend.
You're 100%. Yep.
Like I don't think their relationship was sexual at all, but I think he treated her like a pet, and sometimes he was negligent and sometimes he was cruel. I don't think he was great I mean, I think they had fun too. Like he does have that nice speech about like seeing the world through her eyes, and that's why he kept her around. He could experience wonder through her, which he can't do otherwise. But yeah, I do think he was cruel to her. I do think he was both like neglectful, casually cruel. He would probably dump her places for weeks at a time because he was bored or went off to do something else.
Him and Gul Dukat could really exchange stories about being cruel to women.
He would not like Dukat. I predict.
No, of course, they're too much alike deep down.
They're too much alike. But they would have a lot of stories about, oh yeah, I once did this, I once did that. Because Dukat thinks he's being, a wonderful guy and charming, while he's also being a jerk and abusive to somebody. So it's a very similar characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Why are there no statues of Q at Starfleet headquarters?
Exactly.
Well, Robert, we do have to run. We know you got to go, but we do appreciate very much you taking the time. By the way, show off your shirt for a second for everybody. They can't see it.
So my
it is.
Writers Guild of America.
I just came back.
Which you're doing a lot of work on the front line, Robert. So for those people that are listening, the amount of work that you're doing to kind of help the writers get their fair share, man, that's really appreciated. And the actors also going to have to be in that boat as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, look, I think we're at a little bit of a tipping point, in Hollywood, but also in society in general, where the sort of corporations have been able to get away with a lot of really not good practices, and the result of that has been an erosion of like the middle class and to the empowerment of the people at the top, and it's kind of like becoming a little bit of a new Gilded Age. And I think because of that, unions have always been the first line of defense against that kind of thing, and none of us want to be out there pounding the pavement. No one wants to go on strike, but it's sort of a sign of the times, and hopefully we can get what we want without too much more pain, but we have to get what we need. So it'll go on until they give it to us.
It's a necessity.
Well,
it's not a want, it's a necessity. Yeah.
I wish circumstances were different. I was on a show. I would very happily be like on set this week. I think I would have been on set, doing my second episode. But we're just at a time when the corporate abuse of power is very, very high right now, and it's causing some pretty bad economic disparities. And so when that happens, the union it's time for the unions to show up again and show up strong. I heard something the other day, like the current approval of unions in the United States, like just like are unions a good thing, is that I think it's at like 68%. And that's the highest it's been since the mid 60s. So
wow.
It's 70 years. It has not been this high. And I think that's just a sign of like a lot of people are getting a raw deal. And, look, we're a very blessed profession, and we do make decent money, but like, so should everybody. And, we need more because we're getting less than we were. Our pay is way down, across the board. And
you're making Ram and Lita proud right now every day. And you're making us proud, and we're all rooting for you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Everybody at home, to get more information on that, follow Robert HEWITT WOLFE on Twitter. That's Writer Geek RHW
on Twitter or Tumblr. Actually, because of other corporatization issues of Twitter.
Follow him on Tumblr instead.
I answer questions on Tumblr now. So I don't answer questions on Twitter now. But if you follow me on Twitter, you're going to get a lot of union stuff. So be prepared, because that's mostly what I'm doing.
All right, everybody, stick around. We will be right back. Very special thanks to Robert HEWITT WOLFE for joining us. Really appreciate you. And everybody, we'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule. This is the deep dive of Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Episode 6, with Cirroc Lofton, of course.
Hello.
I'm drinking a delicious beverage. I didn't catch what that was, but it looked really good.
No, just that old-fashioned water.
Oh, that's oh. Well, it is nothing other than a replica of Captain Janeway's coffee mug.
Oh yeah,
with magic elixir in it.
Courtesy of the Voyager documentary.
Mm-hmm. All right,
and my friends over there,
and me. No, I'm just kidding. We're friends
Ryan.
still, right? I think. Real quick, here are the trivioids of the week, or maybe the month, since it's a deep dive. Dr. Bashir mistook a preganglionic fiber for a postganglionic nerve during the orals, or he would have been valedictorian. You know, that was going to be in the opening trivioids, and at the last second, I chickened out and it said, no, quark makes great couscous. Let's just
go easy for the easy one.
Also, there are 3 passengers aboard the shuttlecraft Ganges. Vash had been in the Gamma Quadrant for over 2 years. Vash's gemstones molecular density and refraction index is much higher than a Promethean quartz. Professor Wu suspended Vash's membership from the Institute's Archaeological Council. Captain Picard likes a good challenge. Q is called the god of lies on Brax, but they mean it in an affectionate way. Quarks makes a delicious couscous. Thanks for saving me, Quarks. Kolos buys the first piece of the Gamma Quadrant for 36 bars of gold pressed latinum. People have uncovered the ruins of a Roque provincial capital on Tartarus 5. Thank God I saved those to later. Those are too hard to say.
I like Tartarus sauce on my fillet of fish.
Ah, excellent. Dentists hate Tartarus, though. So, this episode.
So right off top, I'm going to give you Dr. Bashir's macking game in the opening scene was about a 3 out of 10.
But Chief O'Brien was our window. We were watching him. We're like, "Yep, this guy gets it." He's just like looking at him like, "Oh God, what's going on?"
Yeah, I love it. Those are some of the best facials, and O'Brien's facials were some of the best. And speaking of that, Ryan, I wanted to ask you what you thought about, or how you feel about being sucked in the wormhole. DS9.
Well, it they were afraid of it at first, but as they saw, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Some ships rather enjoy it, and so I'm sure they would have been fine. The problem is that that station is just way too big for that wormhole, and so it's just they're just going to go on with those runabouts and move on with their lives.
It'll blow into 1,000 pieces. Mm-hmm. Quick question: this is the first episode where they showed, which I thought was interesting as a concept, because we always get different things on the show. This one is the first time I saw a safe deposit or a bank type of scenario on the station.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting because she was checking in those artifacts and they were doing an item inventory log, and it looked like a safe deposit vault on the station, which I thought, wow, that's clever, and I don't remember seeing that before.
I agree, and I had forgotten about that, and I made a few notes on it because I was like, oh, that's really interesting that these are super valuable. And she'd rather put them in that safety deposit box rather than in her own quarters. So they're so valuable that she's worried that something might happen in her quarters. And I believe the character's name was the assayer who checks it.
Okay.
I've never heard that term, but I'm assuming that's just somebody that, does that kind of stuff. But I found it really interesting too, just because it was one of those slice of Federation life that we hadn't seen, that kind of tells us what life is like in the future, or what life is like on a station where, shady dealings happen. So you do have to have contingency plans and, things that are kind of like investments into protecting your assets or something. I liked it. I thought it was a cool, interesting scene because it was, as far as I know, the only time we've ever seen something like that.
Yeah, I thought it was a great thing because, maybe on a spaceship, like, Enterprise or something, it wouldn't have it because everybody's going to be personnel. But something like a space station where you have so many people coming in and out, you would you would probably have a need for a safe deposit box like that for valuable items. So I just thought it was a clever touch, something we hadn't seen before. I really liked Quark in this episode. I thought his greed and his facial expressions were great. I love when he talked about his customers, how he loved them because they were wealthy and not too bright. that was that was great, and I really enjoyed Odo's scene when he talks about the just the useless cycle of junk collecting, and just like it kind of it rings true to some degree where we just constantly just hoarding stuff and until the point where
I think we're all, when we're watching this, we're all thinking like, I totally agree with you, Odo, and I wish I could be more like you because we all were like,
I wish I could,
especially because what I was thinking actually when he was talking about that was how freeing it must be for him when somebody gets him a gift. He just goes, nah, I don't need it. I don't want it. It's a little bit rude, but he never has to deal with it. Whereas the rest of us, we're so petrified of hurting anybody's feelings with good reason that if somebody gives you something you don't necessarily want, you don't go, nah, I don't want it. Fuck off. We just go, a cat can opener that smells like kibble. Thank you. I don't have a cat, but this is great. Yeah, no. This is, I'll definitely sure to find a
when I get a cat, I'll use it.
Yeah. We're all so scared. Whereas Odo's got it good. He's like, nah, I don't want it. No thanks. No junk. I don't want stuff.
Yeah, no, I helped a buddy of mine move, and I showed up, and he's like, yeah, can you help me move? I show up, and nothing's in boxes.
Oh, no.
Everything's just like, and I was like, what do you mean help you pack? Because I'm not helping you pack. I'll help you move, won't help you pack.
He wanted you to do his dishes for him, vacuum his floor.
Yeah. Not doing that. I'll help.
I'll lift boxes.
I'll lift boxes. But I'm not putting stuff in boxes and wrapping stuff up with newspaper. But yeah, it's a freeing thing that Odo has this mentality where he's able to kind of be not attached to any kind of material possession. I thought that's just ideally is a great mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
I was just going to say, I also thought that it was really cool that we see Vash. I always want to call her Vash because that's what Picard calls her, but it's Vash. We see Q, and they're together in the same episode and never seen again. And, as Robert was saying, it does kind of make it a Vash episode. And if it's a Vash episode, it would have made me want to see her more times than just this one. Like, it would have been nice, kind of like what happened with Majel Roddenberry and the Lwaxana Troi character. She was in, I think, 2 episodes, maybe 3. And they introduced her as a potential recurring character, and it just didn't work out that way for whatever reason. I feel like it would have been cool if Vash was a recurring character as well. Because having her with Q just kind of muddies it up a little bit to where we don't really get to focus on one and not the other. I think it was probably a good idea for the people at the top to say, no Q, you guys don't get Q, because I think one time was good with Q, and Q's thing is he likes ships that are going places, so he can bring them to weird places and new adventures and that. I don't think he fits as well bothering a space station. I think that without him and without the Borg, like Robert was saying, it opens the door for the writers to create the Dominion instead. Okay, we can't use the Borg. We can't use Q. Fine, let's create the Dominion. And man, thank God they did, right?
Yeah, thank God they did, because obviously the Dominion storyline is something that is fantastic and so good, and in fact that they had to reuse it in the Picard in the new seasons of Picard. So it is a good story, good storyline. I guess the thing that I had with this episode was the fact that Q was a little bit outside of his normal character in this. Usually, when he shows up, he's the focal point, and it felt like he was the third wheel almost in this episode. I felt like this could have been an episode like an Indiana Jones. She's basically playing like a Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones type of character, intergalactic, archaeologist, which I like that storyline. And I also saw that the partnership with Quark and her could have been something that could have been developed on. And, she could have been an ally for Quark in the future. And I
you
also
are going to love her in Next Generation, because you are going to get some of that in the Next Generation.
Yeah. I also feel like Q was introduced too early in the episode. I felt like they could have just had more of her story, more mystery behind her. They had the orb or whatever it was, that Promethean quartz object. That could have been more the focal point of the mystery, and less about her running away from him. Because you can't really run away. Can you really run away from Q? Like,
no.
That's what I'm saying. You can't. So
she sure wanted
when
to,
he leaves,
but yeah.
When he leaves, she's like, "Oh, I'll go on that thing," like as if whispering when he's gone is going to change the fact that he can hunt her down anywhere in the world.
And he's the kind of jerk that he would deliberately show up when you're pooping, like just every single time, and you're just like, why can't you just wait? And he's, of course, he's gonna be like, well, because this is much funnier to me, is to bother you when you're doing this. You at least turn away, bro. Anyway, let's take a quick break and wipe that from the record. Strike that from the record. We'll be right back on the Seventh Rule. Welcome back to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton. No more toilet humor. That actually was toilet humor, come to think of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I would have liked to see Vash more, as I was mentioning earlier, because you were saying that she really has, she's a good character. I think Robert was saying that Jennifer Hetrick, she's a great actress. She certainly has that gleam in her eye, that spunk, that, that little thing that a lot of successful actors and actresses have that draw you in. You're interested. She's got like that, that little gleam in her eye, that glint.
I did. I saw it, and I actually saw it in several moments. Obviously, she wears it throughout the episode, but there was moments, for example, when she's talking with Sisko. I think they're walking and talking. Sisko shows up, and she says something to the effect of, he's like, "So, tell me about that stuff that you got going on." And she's like, "Well, I can't tell you because it's personal," or something to that effect. And the way she said that was so disarming. It was lovely. It was with a smile. It was engaging, but it was like, don't ask me what it is. I'm not going to tell you. You already know. I'm not going to tell you. And it was playful, and I like that interaction with Sisko because it brought up a playfulness out of him as well because of the way she delivered the line. His response was also playful, like, "I know, it's personal." So things like that is why she adds a lot to the character. She was great opposite Armin in this episode as well. She
was disarming him.
Yeah, she was disarming him, and the whole touching his lobes and knowing his sweet spot. The whole negotiation scene between the two of them when he starts out at 50-50 and she's just like stroking him down lower and lower until finally we get down to 22 or whatever percent.
Yeah.
So I just loved her scenes, and that's why I felt like he didn't really need Q in this episode per se, or he could have even come up later.
And right, and I think the reason that was pitched that way, not to get into the mind of the writers or like Hannah Louise Shear who pitched the episode, but they probably thought, well, if we have Vash, we have to include Q because the last time we saw her, she was with him. Now, we don't have to, but the writers are probably thinking the fans will want to know what's up with those two more than just a passing word of, she could easily just say, oh yeah, I left him in the Gamma Quadrant or something. But, fans would probably rather actually see it. But yeah, again, having the two of them, and this is each one of them, their only episode in Deep Space Nine, kind of takes away having a Q episode or having a Vash episode because they're both in there together.
Well, I mean, there's a way it could have been done that I would have liked it better. And I can see why Robert Wolfe was talking about some of the critiques that he had when he was, watching it episode. For one, he felt like he was adding to the narrative that DS9 was a dark, kind of dismal show. He felt like he was confirming that with Q's dialogue. I agree with him on that assessment that he did need to help that idea along. But what I would say is going back to what he said about abusive relationship. If this was an abusive relationship episode, I would have liked it to have stayed along that line of narrative. And it could have been this Vosh character running away from Q because he's abusing her and enlisting Sisko's help.
It's a great point. This is great. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. If she had said to Sisko, Q's bothering me. I can't shake this guy, and he's terrorizing my life. And Sisko sees examples of that. Like the way he abused her by aging her, balding her, and all of the stuff he did to her. If Sisko sees that and stands up for her against Q, like, you need to leave this woman alone. I'm not going to tolerate that kind of abuse in my station. And then Q and Sisko could get into, all right, well then I'm going to put you, right. Then I'm going to put you in a situation. I'm going to erase everybody, and now show me what you got. Now it's Sisko versus Q. And Sisko could win the debate in per se that you need to leave this woman alone.
Yeah, that's very
she
good.
Wants to go to Daystrom. And I think they could have used that.
And I could see a scene with Sisko saying, all right, Chief O'Brien, come to my office. What do you know about this guy? What are we dealing with? And O'Brien says something to the effect of, well, he's omnipotent. He's omniscient. He says, yes, I've read the reports. What do you know personally? And he says, he's a jerk. He likes to mess with people. He's, whatever it is. And then you can really, let this fresh commander Sisko address the issue in a way that only he can. And that's a really good point. That's a whole episode in and of itself, is dealing with how do you get rid of Q after he's been abusing Vash. And Vash she's a very strong, she's a very independent, very intelligent woman, but Q is a super being, you know what I mean? Yeah, anybody would need help. Again, she could be like, look, I've done everything I can, but I can't shake this guy. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that would have been a way I would have gone with this episode, instead of the other way that they decided to go. That way we could have seen Sisko standing up to Q on behalf of somebody and on principle, and then punching him or whatever and telling him, get off my ship.
We keep saying that. We keep saying, but then still punching him.
Yeah.
But keep that part. We like that.
We all agree that we like the part where he gets punched by Sisko. I think that's a unanimous, even 30 years of hindsight doesn't change my mind on that one. I definitely enjoyed that.
Fisticuffs, pugilism, the manly art of self-defense. That was fun. And Sisko gave him a nice, funny look after he knocked him out. Like, you shouldn't have effed around if you didn't want to find out, bro.
Yeah. I also liked when Vosh says, "You're arrogant, overbearing, and you think you know everything." And Q's like, "I do know everything."
I actually talked to the TV there. When she said that, when she said, "You think you know everything?" I said the same thing. I was like, "He does know everything." And then he said, "I do know everything." I was like, "Yeah, see, he does." Does that mean I know everything? Because I knew? No.
Uh-oh.
Well, we're going to have a free-for-all in just a moment. We're going to have some clips with Aaron Eisenberg when we first discussed this episode back in 2019. It was actually June of 2019. Let's look up the exact date because I'm a nerd that way. It was June 13th, 2019 was when we recorded this thing. We also had Mark Zicree on as a guest. But anyway, so we've got some clips of what Aaron Eisenberg said about this episode and some really interesting things that he brought up that Malissa Longo found for us. So we will be addressing those, and we'll be talking about things that we noticed this time that we hadn't noticed before. And on our way out, let's give a very special thanks to Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arukin, our good pal Titus Moeller, Darlena Marie Blander, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anna Post, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, DQ, Neil, say it with me, Akasaka. Our good friend Justine Norton Kurtzen, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, live from Tokyo, Mr. Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Nikki T, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and Jason Oken. All right, everybody. If that wasn't fun already, it's going to get even more fun. Here we go. The free-for-alls are up next. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton. This is the free-for-all. Malissa Longo is here wearing an old-school purple Seventh Rule shirt that I love. Eve England is also wearing a shirt made by Malissa. You can get yours at theintrovertedrepublic.com. Carrie Schwent here is all set for the month of June, looking good in that cool Star Trek Pride shirt. Wow, everybody's got cool shirts today. Allison's got her Garrick's Clothiers shirt today. Jason Oken is dressed smartly, as always, with a radical poster behind him. Golda Scott Jensen has the New Jersey Devils and an awesome family shirt. Is that the Ferengi? No, it's the Sisko family. Beautiful. And Mai is live in Tokyo. The sun's probably not even come up yet. She's got her Chat Pack shirt on. First things first, Cirroc Lofton. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
Oh, Deep Space Nine Q-less. We'll say probably like 7.3.
Does anybody else have a guess that didn't already check or doesn't already know?
Probably mid-sixes, mid to high sixes. 6, 7.
Interesting. I like how Eve actually checked her notes to decide. That was cool. It is a 6.7 on IMDb, everybody. The people at IMDb, people that voted, gave it a 6.7. Did you get the non-appearance mention today?
Card.
Yeah.
Card. He was all over it.
Yeah, he got mentioned quite a bit.
Yeah.
And Picard's lackeys, but I don't know if we can count. We're like, which ones are the lackeys? All right. Well, Malissa Longo has some clips prepared for us. From the last time we reviewed this episode, we recorded it on June 13th, 2019, with Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. Also, writer Mark Zickree joined us, but these are clips from after that. And it originally aired on June 16th, 2019. So here is the first one from Mr. Aaron Eisenberg. And thank you, Malissa, for doing the legwork on this for us. Let's see if this works.
I was just wondering why they didn't transport them, beam them out of the runabout at the very beginning. I was thinking to myself, why are they spending so much time trying to open up the door? And it's like they were on an elevator trying to open up elevator doors that go out to space. Obviously, it goes into the runabout. And I was thinking to myself, in the episode before, they beamed out the guy whose ship, was stuck on the pylon. Remember and this time they didn't. And I don't like when they do things like that.
It don't make sense, yeah.
Yeah, it's like set a rule, then follow that rule. If you can do that, then don't make a conflict where the question's going to be just beam them out. And
good point, Aaron. What inspired this one from you, Malissa?
Well, I completely agreed with him. I mean, why set a conflict that can be solved by just beaming somebody out? And it's a non-conflict, really, then, because you have the ability to beam them out. Easy fix. Less dramatic, but
Yeah, why didn't they beam them out? Did they say? They didn't say, did they?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I'm pissed too now.
Okay,
all right.
They beamed the box out into the middle of space, so Yeah.
Did they ever show the third person on that ship? I saw Dax and I saw Bosch.
He was a background dude in the same color as Dax.
Yeah.
Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they went a little Orchiola, did the back of his head sort of thing.
Yeah, and
Good
he
knowledge.
was passed out.
Carrie, did they explain how Ganges was picked up Bosch? Like how Dax ended up?
Well, she did say that in the beginning, that they found her in the Gamma Quadrant, and so that's when they picked her up.
Carrie, I just realized how much stuff is in your background. Wow.
Yeah, it was inspired by Odo. His little rant about accumulating stuff. And I happened to be looking up at one of my shelves at the time. I'm like, yep, I know what my background is. So I walked around the house taking pictures of everything.
Beautiful.
And this isn't even all of it either. Poor Eric, he's going to have so much stuff to go through if I go before he does.
All right. So up next is another clip from Mr. Aaron Eisenberg, our favorite human. And it goes a little something like this.
I felt that the best thing they could have done is use Q to put Sisko in a moral and philosophical dilemma on why he thinks the station is being pulled into the wormhole, and he has to figure out, is it this group of people? Is it this? Is he using, what's influencing him to figure out who it was, if you're going to bring Q in to be the catalyst for Sisko?
Melissa, your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, I'm in agreement with Aaron in that they misutilized Q in this episode, I think, and he didn't really seem to have a purpose. I like that Aaron wanted them to use Q to, maybe explore a moral and philosophical dilemma. And instead of, trying to, I get that maybe they were trying to show how Sisko and how Deep Space Nine differs from the Enterprise, but we didn't really need Q for that. So.
Yeah, we're kind of talking about that a little bit. What do you guys think? Better with or without Q?
Well, Q wasn't there. Q was there just because of Vosh. He was having abandonment issues. They'd been hanging out for 2 years, and he wasn't ready to stop hanging out so soon. So he was more focused on her. That he just happened to catch up to her at the station. That incidental.
Yeah, he didn't move the story.
He just wanted to keep
along.
hanging out with Vosh.
He wasn't part of the problem or part of the solution. He was just there.
I was just cracking up at
something that we talked about.
Sorry, Cirroc, what were you saying?
No, that's something that we were talking about earlier, just about that particular subject. And I think Aaron is completely right about that, about not using Sisko properly in the storyline. Mm-hmm. I think that I would have liked to see Sisko assisting Vosh in getting away from Q. I think that would have been a better story for me. I think that we were talking about this being like an abusive relationship and her needing some help. And Sisko would have been the perfect guy to stand up to Q and say, not on my watch, not on my station, and I'm not going to let that go down. And he could have separated them or got him off of her back. And I thought that could have been a better use of Sisko and Q. And make it less about this orb and all of this stuff, this crystal or whatever. Make it less about that and more about Sisko standing up to Q on a point of righteousness, that he's always standing on principle. So that kind of would have revealed his character better.
Yeah.
The way they revealed Picard when they first used Q, and Picard was explaining the Federation doesn't do it like this, and I refuse to, cross certain lines, and we have, a morality to our agenda, explaining to Q that this is what Starfleet's about, this is what I'm about, and they could have used that to explain what Sisko's about really early.
It's the way I see this, it's almost like a next gen episode written with DS9 characters in it, and that's probably why it doesn't work. And frankly, they even go and list things why it doesn't work and shouldn't, why it differentiates from next gen, and that's the reason it doesn't work. I mean, it's not that DS9 is a serious show. It's about Cirroc, as you said, it's about people, it's about character, it's about something. It's not about sort of these puerile jokes. Doesn't mean that it's not funny. DS9 can be funny. I mean, look at Looking for Primarch in all the wrong places, Little Green Man. They can be humor, but it's a different type of humor. It's not ha 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 puerile jokes kind of humor. So Q doesn't really work in that context. And they list these things. That's the funny thing. They say, well, I'm not this. I'm not getting this repartee. This is I'm not Picard, and that's why it doesn't work. And they actually say why it doesn't, which makes it quite a bit interesting. It's just
very meta,
and even ends with an object becoming a space creature, just like in Farpoint. I mean,
yes, they got their own jellyfish.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah. But it was more of a manta ray kind of thing.
Yeah, like a manta ray or devil ray.
And so you're right, Cirroc. It's the whole thing is about this thing. It's about plot. It's not about character, and that's what makes this so different.
All right. So that actually brings us to the next point by Aaron Eisenberg perfectly when we're talking about character and what Deep Space Nine is known for.
I miss what I don't like in the last couple episodes, and we got 30 seconds, is we haven't revisited the family. We haven't seen Jake in the last 2 episodes. So we haven't seen Sisko with his family. And I'm missing that. And that to me is bothering me, just for the record.
Just for the record.
For the record.
What do you think, Malissa?
Again, totally agree. The thing that sets Deep Space Nine apart from many shows, not just Star Trek, but shows across the board, is the family connection that it has. And it's kind of lacking in this episode. You could make an argument that Vosh and Q are kind of family in a way, but it just doesn't work in the setting of Deep Space Nine, because we're here to watch Deep Space Nine and invest in the characters of Deep Space Nine and the familial relationships going on Deep Space Nine. So to bring something out, something from a different show, that from a different kind of family, feels kind of like a crutch and a letdown.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. For someone who hasn't watched TNG as well, you just don't care about the characters who you're spending most of the time with. So, I didn't know who Vash is, so I don't, really care much about her character. She seems quite interesting in of herself, but you don't have any of that context of what her relationship was with Picard or with Q, or however that all comes together. I mean, I did find her relationship with Quark more interesting, and I did think that was the one thing I did like, is that we did learn a lot about Quark from her interactions with him, so I did enjoy that. But apart from that, it kind of, it felt a bit hollow, because they just seemed to be trying to pay or lip service basically to the old show, and it just didn't really work. I just didn't get that the story was an interesting enough story, and the characters weren't interesting enough in themselves. And it would have been nicer for them to just focus on the core characters rather than on these two effectively randoms in the whole show.
Good point. Everybody at home, just know that Eve doesn't like The Next Generation. That's why she's saying this. Otherwise, she'd be like, "Yeah, Vosh and Q are back. Woo! Finally." Anyway, well, let's.
Scott's like,
I'm with Eve.
Let's take a quick break, everybody, and then we're going to talk about anything that we noticed this time that we hadn't noticed the many other times we've seen this episode. So everybody stick around, get your game face on. We'll be right back on the 7th Rule. Welcome back to the 7th Rule. This is the Deep Space Nine Deep Dive with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
This is Q-less. Some say it's episode 6. Others say it's episode 7. Eve England says, doesn't matter. It's better than Next Generation. Whatever episode it is. But anyway, let's talk about this episode a little bit more and what we've noticed this time watching it that we hadn't noticed previously. What do you think, Malissa?
Yeah, I was going into this episode wondering what I noticed this time. I noticed Quark more this time than I did before. From the time he entered Vosh's quarters, and then he gets disappeared by Q, and then reappeared by Q. His reaction to that was priceless. And then when he's getting umoxed by her, it was great. He's just, Quark was a rock star in this episode. I really noticed Bashir's skeeviness in this episode. He's a bit of a perv. And I don't know that he's aware of it. I don't know if it's a conscious thing. He's just, swinging away, see where he lands, And then O'Brien, I chose this background because Brian's expressions and reactions in
The
this
side eye.
were great. I think Colomini is awesome, and I think he does a wonderful job, and I am noticing him more and more on these rewatches. So, yeah.
What about you, Allison Leach Hyde, wearing her Radical Garrick's Clothier's shirt? Did you notice anything this time around that you hadn't really noticed before?
Well, I agree that it feels like a next gen episode set on Deep Space Nine. It would have been nice to get more character development from our new cast. My main questions were on the smaller side. Who went through and decorated all of the rooms with all the knickknacks between the Cardassians leaving and the Bajorans taking over? There's a lot of artwork.
Probably
in
Carrie.
Bosch's, quarters. I'm like, well, why? But okay. I mean, it makes it pretty and nicer to look at on screen, of course. And the one that made me laugh the hardest was during the auction when he says 500 or 600 bars of gold pressed latinum and holds up his hand and he has 6 fingers. I didn't notice that one the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice it this time.
Yeah.
Oh, he's got 6 fingers. I'm like, so
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. And Bashir is very self-involved. And I love the scene with him and Q when he says, "My God, you're an impertinent waiter." So, love that delivery. So those were my favorite parts.
Did anybody else yawn during that scene?
When he was yawning?
Oh, wow.
I yawned.
It's good. It shows empathy.
Q is very powerful.
He is very powerful.
Oh, good stuff. What about you, Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear? Your thoughts? Did you notice anything this time you hadn't noticed before?
Oh yeah, a couple things I noticed, and one thing the hubby noticed that I'll sneak in. But the first thing was that crystal that is glowy. I'm looking at that and I'm thinking that looks just like the one Riker gave what's her name in the Angel 1 episode. And looking up stuff afterwards as I do, it was confirmed. I'm like, I was right. It's the same one. And Eric's yelling from the other room. Okay, you scare me. The way you make notice stuff from other things. It's my superpower. What can I say? And the thing he noticed is during the auction, the Rule the Obscure. Just that name is so cool. The wardrobe. I want to know more about this person because that wardrobe was very, very cool. And the last thing is when Q at the end is talking about 1,000 years ago, Earth was so much more fun. The Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, Watergate.
Yeah.
Watergate?
Which the math doesn't really add up there, but
no, it doesn't.
The joke worked.
Not for the other two either. It was the whole thing was wrong. Yeah.
It's a different Watergate.
way too many. Like, yeah. Did the rewound? Make sure I heard it right, and then pause and went Watergate. Why Watergate? So many other things you could have picked as like the third. One of these things is not like the others. And I definitely would have liked to see Q face off with Kira. Just that one tiny little exchange they had in Ops. There was a little bit of a spark there. The two of them having a longer scene together would have been interesting.
Mm.
If you don't remove your hand off of my thigh,
yeah,
she would probably say something like that to Q.
Remember that line?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, how'd that get there? So everybody at home that's typing away feverishly, the Spanish Inquisition was between 1478 and 1834. 1478 sides, pretty close to 1,000 years. The Crusades, it said, began sometime around 1,000 something and ended 1200 something. Like, that's a The Watergate, yeah, that's a little.
It's just fun.
Yeah, that's just for us to enjoy.
Yeah.
So Eve England is out in Wales. Did you notice anything this particular time that you hadn't noticed before?
I think what I've noticed more was, as Melissa said, O'Brien was particularly funny in this episode. I just loved how when he sees Q, it's, oh, bloody hell. It's like classic O'Brien. And then he proceeds to say bloody at least one more time throughout the episodes, which I thought was, you don't often see that on Star Trek. And I know it's not a proper swear word, but it kind of is to some people. So I thought that was really funny. And it's just his expressions, because he just knew what sort of trouble this was going to be for him and the rest of the station. Although it didn't end up being any trouble at all, as we've said. But I thought that sort of initial observation just really set the scene for the episode. I thought that was funny.
We're going to have to ask this when we're not recording, but speaking of swear words between the UK and America, you guys have a swear word, or that we think is a very bad word, but you guys are like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. I call my mates that all the time, but we'll, I think that's for when we're not recording.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying. All right, Mai is live in Tokyo. What is up, Mai? What'd you notice this time?
The relationship between Vosh and Quark, I think, was, to me, it jumped out. But with Q really just sort of staying with Vosh right by her side. Could we call him a Klingon? I mean, he was clinging on to her quite a lot, actually. His crush on Vosh was almost sweet at the end, but as everybody said, I don't think that he establishes a relationship with anybody else. He didn't need to be there, but it just didn't fit on DS9, not even a little bit, except for that classic scene where Sisko tags him. I thought that was all right. The Vosh and Quark dynamic, though, it was a storyline by itself. It reminded me of the Tosk and O'Brien, where this whole story relied on this relationship between two people, and I thought I got much more out of that than the Q effects. One thing with Quark, though, he was really enjoying that Umux, as Melissa said. But then at one point, he grabs his own ear. I'm thinking, what is he missing, Vosh, or something? What's up with that? So
to finish.
So for Q, exactly. For Q less, I gotta say less Q. That's all.
Oh, mic drop.
Boom. Sorry about that.
So rather than miss Q, you thought this was a miscue.
Well, exactly. Thank you.
So thank you. Goldu Scott Jensen, what did you notice this time around that you hadn't noticed before?
I noticed how I was a little bit less entertained with this than with other viewings, unfortunately. We watched this one waiting to see Sisko just clock Q in the jaw. I did love that scene, though. I think I heard Mr. Brooks hit an octave that he didn't hit until then or afterwards at all, when he goes, "What?" as soon as everything flips over to the pugilist arena. And I love how Quark was immediately just putting bets down. Reality just shifted around him, and he doesn't waste a second to put down bets, and it's that quickly. I noticed more how it's just pretty much like everybody was saying, it feels like it is a next gen episode. And I don't know if maybe that was something that the network said, that they needed to have some kind of crossover somewhere at some point, because it did feel really shoehorned. It was like a jealous ex-boyfriend come to town to stalk somebody who we're not even emotionally connected with. Even though it did end in, John DeLance is amazing with his delivery on so many things he says at all times. So that was, it was entertaining in that respect. But then I was absolutely floored by how awesome this electric space stingray flying into the wormhole at the end was. I don't know how I didn't remember that very much, but yeah, for real. And then I think it should become some kind of Starfleet like standard operating procedure that whenever Q shows up, everybody's just like completely exasperated and tired. Like nobody bows to this guy. He's like omnipresent and he's snapping and stuff, and nobody cares. They're just like, oh my God, here he is again. But my favorite line this time too, Kira definitely nailed it, and I absolutely agree that there should have been more with the two of them. when they're talking about Q's here, and Kira just said, "What's Q?" It just felt so just out of place and wonderful. It was absolutely great. But yeah, she would have wound up shooting him by the end or find a way to throw him into the wormhole. Who knows? Who knows what the prophets would have done to Q?
Yeah.
Where's the levels there?
That would have been an
who's tougher?
interesting interaction. Gods versus gods.
Yeah.
Carrie says, we all know how much I love Q, but even I can admit he doesn't belong on DS9. I liked him better on Voyager. She holds up her Q guy. Is that a Q doll, Q puppet, Q guy? What is it?
Yeah, they're called like itty bitties or something. Got it, a Hallmark.
Oh, really?
We're having a Hallmark moment? Nice.
So cute.
He's still got a sweet chain, too. I love that.
Yeah.
Sweet chain he's got on the front.
Yeah, but at least his isn't hanging from his ears like Bosch's necklace was. That just gave me a headache seeing it hanging from her ears like that. I mean, that could not have been comfortable. I mean, I don't wear earrings, but it could not have been comfortable.
Well, Jason Oken is very comfortable, and he's about to drop some knowledge on everybody, so I hope you get comfortable as well. Jason, did you notice anything today that you hadn't noticed prior with this episode?
Sure. And, obviously I already talked about the fact that it really sort of had this next generation feel to it. And that's what it is. I mean, and I think I may have said this previously, that there was a lot of at least the thought process was at the beginning of the DS9. It was kind of written like the next generation. And, some of these episodes didn't quite fit because the dynamic of the show was different. And I think this is, if there's an example of that, this is an absolutely prime example of it. I think it's probably the worst offender of the entire run, certainly of the entire first season, and it's probably one of my least favorite DS9 episodes, and certainly my least favorite Q episode of any of these shows. Not to say that it wasn't fun to watch. It's a little bit different to say that, is it fun to watch or is it a good DS9 episode? I think it's a bit fun to watch, but it's not a very good DS9 episode. I mean, these things are not mutually exclusive. So that sort of, we're talking about the character of Bashir. I think there's a lot of disservice being paid to him here, and generally a lot in the first season. And I think in the end, it's kind of cartoonish. Did I miss anything? I mean, this is not 1965. This is not one of those kind of shows. So it really didn't fit. It just not servicing the character very well. Right. And there were a lot of kind of little things. I mean, you always pick up on little things that I guess didn't notice before. When Vosh brings in this little statue and somebody kind of looks at it and says, "Oh, it's 8 kilograms. It's the lightest 8 kilograms I've ever seen." Or they're very strong in the 24th century. And then, when Vosh locks the, closes that locker, it's a 5-digit code. And, I think my iPhone is safer than that.
This guy's got jokes today. I love it.
I like to see that. And one other thing I noticed, and, and I'm just curious. I mean, I know that, certainly the Berman or Trek shows, they try to be letter perfect. And at one point, Vosh says, "Gold Platinum." I wonder if it was written like that or the line was blown.
Right.
We should have asked Robert that too, because I was wondering, is that the only time we've ever heard Gold Platinum? It feels like it is.
I mean, isn't it Gold Press Platinum?
Yeah.
I mean, it's normally Gold Press Platinum.
Yeah. And they also talked about the Latinum coated bucket. I wonder how that happens because Latinum is a liquid. Or at least, it was later revealed to be a liquid. So I guess nobody knew exactly what it was, back in the first season. And, I'll end with this. And, this is more of the look of the episode. It actually looks like a next gen. It's shot like a next gen. I mean, the way directorially. And sometimes what happens is when you have a lot of these two shots and it's, obviously it's sort of this 4:3 letterbox and not letterbox, 4:3 aspect ratio, you end up with two characters being very close. And if you look at the tag scene with Q and Vosh, I mean, if you're looking close talking, I don't think it gets any closer than that.
There were a lot of scenes like that where they were just,
it just looks weird. I mean, I know that aspect ratio forces you together, but there are ways to shoot it differently. It always rubs me the wrong way. And this had This was a little egregious in my view.
Cirroc, on Deep Space Nine, were there uncomfortably close moments that you had to do? Because we noticed them a lot.
Uncomfortably close?
Like, where the two actors have to be like way closer than
sometimes.
what would be natural just because they say it looks better on camera.
Yeah, sometimes, especially when they're trying to frame too many people in one shot. Then you're awkwardly standing close to somebody. It's like, okay. So it happens.
Well, do you have any final thoughts on this Deep Space Nine deep dive today, Cirroc?
One, I noticed that Q called Sisko Benji, and I was offended by it. I thought it was like, what the hell is, call the man by his name, all this little nicknaming stuff. I didn't like that. So I was offended by it. And I didn't notice it before, but Q was being an exceptional asshole in this particular episode. I wanted to go back to the word technobabble and how it was dropped in this episode. I love that. I want to repeat that. I really love that something that is used to describe Star Trek is actually used in Star Trek. I think that's one of the great placements of a word in an episode. It's almost like Lower Decks making fun of itself. So I think that's a great insert there. And actually, Ira commented saying that it was a line we wrote with great glee because at that point we hated the goddamn technobabble. And that sounds like an Ira quote.
Oh, yeah.
It does.
That sounds like a direct Ira quote. And then lastly, I'm going to say this. One of the things that made Q work with Picard was the mutual Shakespeare type of performance that was being brought to the scenes. Picard, Patrick Stewart is known for his Shakespeare. And obviously John Delancey as an actor is known for his love of Shakespeare and his performance on stage. The two of them were able to do their Shakespeare stuff, and it worked well because that's what they both love to do, and it brings out that kind of chemistry. Well, Avery Brooks is one of the best Shakespeare actors in the world as well. He's done Othello. He's done all types of Shakespeare. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I know that he's more than capable to match, if not surpass, Delancey's Shakespearean performances when he does that kind of thing. And I would have liked to see them use Avery's abilities better in this episode, especially when it comes to his knowledge of Shakespeare and the way he can perform it. I think that would have also elevated this episode to a different level. Those are pretty much my take on it. I'm glad that Sisko punched Q and he never came back because we didn't even see that.
Great stuff. We were talking about that meme. If everybody's seen that meme about Picard dealt with Q, Janeway dealt with Q, and then Sisko punched him and never saw him again. Anyway, that's about it, everybody at home. We appreciate you all joining us today, along with Malissa Longo, thank you, and Eve England, Carrie Schwent, Allison Leach Hyde, Jason Oken, Goldus Scott Jensen, and my live out in Tokyo. That's about it for myself, for Cirroc Lofton, for Aaron Eisenberg leading the way. Thank you all very much for joining us. And until next time, enjoy our wild America. No, nobody watched that show. Anybody remember that show? It's like an animal show with Marty Stauffer. Anyway, until next time, always remember the seventh rule.